What's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Now today I'm going to do something on my 96 F150. Actually already done most of it, but I did have one piece left to add on. It's the Big 3, Big 4 upgrade on those. Now the big reason you want to do this, especially on those trucks, you're probably sitting here thinking, well, I'm not adding a stereo on. I'm not adding any big power, power draws into this system. Now why would I want to do this? Now the biggest reason you'd want to do something like this is really just to help the system overall. They didn't put big alternators on these trucks, and I haven't upgraded mine, but I did notice when I first got it, it does have power windows, power locks, kind of all the accessories with it. And anytime I'd really start straining that system, that gauge would just start dipping way down. It was as simple as rolling my window all the way down, and that gauge would just peg way down to nothing. I'll show you the reasons why, and I'll show you the big thing to look out for when you're upgrading these. So stick around, I'll take you out to the truck, and we'll kind of show you what I've done here. Alright, so we're out here under the hood of my old 96. The first thing you'll probably notice, and I know it's hard to see with the light there, but I'll bring you in for a little bit closer look, is just the battery terminals and the lug ends on all the cables. Now I don't like typically feeding the cable just into these universal lug ends. I like putting actual lugs on there and just bolting them down. Gets you the same effect as like your aftermarket fancy stereo connectors, but without all the hassle and everything you can just pick up at your local parts store. After that, you want to turn your attention over here to this main body ground. It runs right on the back side of the battery. Now I don't go crazy. You'll see a lot of the stereo guys will upgrade these to, aught gauge and double aught gauge, and I'm not running a big stereo, so I don't really need all that. But I did go with 2 gauge on most of my main stuff, and then some of the smaller stuff like the body ground, that's 8 gauge, and some of the other accessory stuff. So I'll bring you in for a little closer look here. You can notice the body ground right there. Like I said, upgraded that. That's an 8 gauge now. It was originally like a 10 or a 12 gauge wire from the factory. You can see I tied everything from the alternator back. It runs along here, and I put it to the post on my solenoid instead of running it directly to the battery. Now the only reason I really did that was because that's how Ford did it from the factory, and who am I to really mess with that? I also like to kind of tie everything down neatly, keep it out of the way. The one last thing I was waiting on to upgrade was I ran out of cable. Terrible lighting. I ran out of cable, and so I ended up finding this old chunk of power cable from an old stereo setup that I had. The one thing I was missing overall was my ground to the alternator, which would be your Big 4 upgrade. But otherwise, it's basically just the wiring for it. I haven't done the main parts of the Big 3. I haven't touched the alternator. It's still original. I have put a one of the Deca batteries, better battery than it had in its stock. And like I said, converting all the battery terminal ends and having these nice connections here, these lug ends on it. But otherwise, I do have the ground to the alternator there. I have my big cable off the back of my alternator running over to my solenoid, and then from the solenoid back around to the battery. Additional ground, of course, with the ground to the alternator, but I have my main ground to the block. I have my main ground to the engine, and then that one I didn't really have room for, so I did just stick it in there. I may change that eventually, but we'll see. It works good enough for now. This is before I've done the ground modifications and just bottoming the window out. And after I've done everything, you can see the gauge barely moves. You can see this doesn't just apply to newer vehicles. I've done this to even my old junk. Alright guys, I hope that helps you out. It definitely helped mine out, made a huge difference, not only in the life of my battery, but just the drain overall on my charging system. I noticed that my gauge wasn't dipping as low, and You can see some examples in the video of that with the last piece that I finished up. But even just from the beginning itself, making these upgrades was a huge difference. A big thing I noticed was that my lights weren't as dim at night, and especially if I had like my blower on or anything like that, running my heat or AC, I noticed my windows seemed to run a little bit faster. Just everything overall seems to work a little bit better. So like I said, huge upgrade. It definitely takes the strain off the alternator, battery, your whole charging system, and you know, if everything's getting the power it needs, everything's going to function a little bit better. I'm glad you checked the video out. I hope it's helpful for you. I hope you can apply this to your own truck or any other vehicle for that matter. Just because I use this truck, I tend to do these upgrades on almost every vehicle I own, especially on the ground side. They tend to go weak on those from the factory, so really something to look out for. It's just as simple as popping the hood and checking it out and seeing what you got there. A lot of times these factory grounds, especially the body grounds, are just tiny. And if you think about the amount of electronics that are run off those body grounds, that can make a huge, huge difference. Well, that'll do it for this video. I'm glad to have you hang out with me for a little bit. I hope you go and check out some of my other videos. Plenty of links. Go check out my channel, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks.